everybody. My name is Alyssa Joy Claffey. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm here to introduce you to my violin. His name is Geoffrey Beauregard, and I have been playing him for the last 31 years. I got him when I was 11 years old. I started the violin when I was 5, and I'll tell you more about that story, but I want to focus in on why I call Geoffrey Beauregard my unshakable why. And it really represents the violin and music in general. But I have come up against a lot of things throughout my life, and I'll go into detail on the parts of those that are important for my story later. But this violin has been a little ship that has guided me through a variety of life experiences, self-imposed by my own ridiculous behavior and choices, and also some just like life stuff, breast cancer, all kinds of physical ailments that I'll go into, because my whole life is about being healthy and well enough to be able to play this instrument. And that was completely taken away from me several years ago. I am a breast cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 36 years old. It was stage 2 intraductal carcinoma, and I ended up going through 6 months of chemo and 30 rounds of radiation, and they removed 7 lymph nodes from my left armpit because the cancer had spread. And turns out those little lymph nodes are pretty important, and it also happened, my breast cancer diagnosis was in 2019, and so then 2020 happened, and we all remember what that was like, and I was not able to go and receive the aftercare treatment of how to take care of an arm with lymphedema. And so by the fall of 2021, my left arm was completely paralyzed. Every time I tried to play, it would go like this, and I couldn't even pick up a glass of water. And I dramatically sold all of my I sold my car to get all of my instruments out of storage unit jail, and all of my Facebook family came and helped me and donated money and loaded all my stuff up into a 26-foot U-Haul, and I drove home to Roby Creek, Idaho to live in my grandpa's basement. And I said, I'm not doing anything until this arm is better and I can play the violin again. And that started a journey of healing of my mind, body, and soul that I had no idea what was coming. And some of you might know me just as your local, Idaho's Grassical violinist who sits in with a bunch of bands and still does classical stuff. Grassical's a term I came up with that is classically trained with twang. It's a little bit bluegrass, it's a little bit classical, it's a little bit everything in between. But the constant of my life, my unshakable why, is this violin, Geoffrey Beauregard. He has been the little ship that has steered me, and he has also been the measuring stick that I have had to hold myself and my behavior and my physical health, my mental stability up against. Can I achieve the level of this? There's something that shapes you about just having to take care of a piece of wood that's over 100 years old. And that was part of the thing. I used to take a lot better care of my violin than I did of my own vessel. There was times during my 30s when I was really living up that rock star lifestyle, which I still do occasionally, but it was the only thing that I cared about, was if my violin was okay. And when it came to that moment where I wasn't going to be able to play anymore, I got real serious real fast. And what happened was, I had already kind of lost everything due to cancer and all of the shutdown and everything. I had just opened a retail music store in Sun Valley, Idaho, with a private studio and a band practice space 3 weeks before my breast cancer diagnosis. You would think that as a musician, I would have better timing. But I knew that I had to make a big change. I thought I was facing carpal tunnel surgery, and I had some bad medical things happen because people didn't understand lymphedema, and I wasn't able to go see the specialists because of all of the shutdowns. And so I ended up just sort of having nothing but all of my instruments and my determination to be able to play the violin. And that is when I came up with this unshakable why. To me, it doesn't matter what it means, I'm going to play my violin. And that's what an unshakable why is. And that's going to be the title of my book that I've been working on for the past several years. It's taken me a long time because it took me a really long time to get back to this place of health, to be able to do it affordably on a musician's, a gigging freelance musician's salary. And for the time when I couldn't do that, there was about 6 months where I couldn't play. And I was on Medicaid, and I was waiting for my first appointment with my lymphedema specialist. And gosh, I didn't have any money. I was actually on food stamps, EBT money. I had $280 a month for food. And my cell phone had gotten shut off, and I was living in the mountains with no cell service anyway. And I think the only thing that I paid for at the time was Epsom salts and PG Tips tea and my YouTube premium subscription, so I could watch every video and do every meditation and listen to every frequency that could heal my body. That was the only thing that mattered to me. And that's what an unshakable why is. And I am blessed and privileged that I have had that since I was 5 years old. How I chose the violin, or how the violin chose me, I was 5 years old, and I was at this homeschool family concert. And I was raised in a homeschool family. I was born on a bus to a ramshackle bunch of Christian hippies who settled in Roby Creek, Idaho, in Carole King's old log cabin and abandoned church camp building turned ski lodge. And we lived a very, very isolated existence. And the first time I saw a violin, it was the Bulla family band. And Luke and Jenny Ann Bulla were playing, and they had just come from the Old Time Fiddle Fest in Weiser, Idaho. And I was hooked. I was smitten by the violin. I had to have a fiddle. I needed it in my life. And in my mind, that happened, and then the next thing I really remember is getting my violin from Telford and Sons. And in real life, it took about 6 months of me hounding my parents, apparently, according to them, every single day, the first thing I did when I woke up. And they were hoping that we were very, very poor. My dad was a carpenter. We lived out in Boise County in the middle of nowhere. And they were hoping that it was just a fad and it was just a phase, and that if they just kept, sort of shining me on, that eventually I would give up on trying to get my first fiddle, my first violin. But I never did. And it has been my unshakable why ever since that moment. I have never had any priority in the world as important to me as playing the violin. And I say that it's the little ship that steered me through and my longest measuring stick, because it really has been. And my most recent encounter with breast cancer and losing the ability to play the violin due to my physical limitations, it really changed my life. And I had been floundering for a while, and I had left my full-time job as a music educator. I was living up that rock star lifestyle a little bit too hard, and it was a huge wake-up call for me, because it was the first time that I couldn't play the violin, and I didn't even know who I was without that. And so I took the few resources that I had, which was a limited amount of funds to procure food and access to the internet, and I did a deep dive into every possible thing that a person can do to heal themselves. And I'm going to be sharing specific videos about each part of those things. Cooking was a huge one for me. I was making all my food from scratch in an anti-inflammatory way. I was doing every meditation I could get my hands on, listening to frequency music, listening to rife frequencies, and I'll do little things about each one, what really helped me. But the first thing that helped me was having that reason, having that unshakable why. And I was, like I said, I was on Medicaid. And by the time I got to my first doctor's appointment to see the lymphedema specialist in March of 2022. I was declared a clinical miracle. She said, I never need to see you again. I only want you to come back for a longer session so you can show me what you've been doing, because the results you are getting on your body, I could never achieve, and you're the only one of my clients who wiggles their fingers for a living. That's what draws the lymph in, is the wiggling, and then I don't have enough lymph nodes left to draw it back out in time, and so it was causing all of these problems. So my entire life is a system to keep my body healthy enough to play this instrument. And so, in a lot of ways, Geoffrey Beauregard, which I must have been quite the precocious 11-year-old to name my violin that, but I also do believe that there is something other than this 3D realm that we find ourselves in, and my life just doesn't make any sense unless there is. And I'm not talking about any form of major religion on this planet. I'm not talking about proselytizing for anything but the power of music to heal us, mind, body, and soul. And so I'm going to be sharing a lot of stories about what I do for my food and how I do it with limited physical capacity because of the lymphedema in my left arm, with limited amounts of funds because I'm a freelance musician. We're not known for making a ton of money, and I don't work full-time because of all of the time it takes for me to do all of the manual lymphatic drainage that I do daily. I do magnesium foot soaks. And cooking your food from scratch basically just means you have to do a ton of dishes. And so I've created a lot of systems to be able to do all of those things and still mostly save my arm for my reason, my unshakable why that I'm here on this planet. So this is Geoffrey Beauregard, and he has been my constant companion for the last 30 years. And a lot of musicians don't play the instrument that they got when they were 11 years old throughout their entire career. But Geoffrey Beauregard has been special from the first moment I played him. And I was studying with Leah Telford at Telford & Sons. And I remember her playing him and then instantly looking at the price tag and going, well, that can't be right. And it was $900, which to a daughter of a carpenter in the 90s was sort of an insurmountable amount of money. It just seemed like that was impossible. And the first second I played him, I knew. And then I played a bunch of other violins, and I remember my teacher, Mrs. Telford, saying, I think this is the wrong price tag, because there's no way that violin with that tone is not priced more. But the reason why Geoffrey Beauregard was priced that way was because he has no label. And so we don't get to know the artisan who made him. From details inside and clues, he was probably made in the 1890s in Germany. And a lot of people refer to that time of violin making in Germany as Deutsche Cremona, meaning it's like the second, spot where Stradivarius was, because they learned how to really sort of mass produce, but in the right way that instruments want to be made. And so a lot of really great instruments came out of that time. And if people had put their labels in him, then it probably would be worth a lot more money. Well, my dad was going to get me a violin. Hi, Daddy. And he work traded as a carpenter, built the Telford & Sons building that you know now if you're in Boise, or if you take lessons from me where you come every week. My dad built that building to get me violin lessons and to get me this instrument. And I made the Boise Philharmonic on this violin when I was 19 years old. And I remember playing him on the back of a catamaran in the Virgin Islands. And they wanted me to use this 5-string electric violin, but the sun was beating down so hard, it was like popping the strings off of this new electric violin. And here's my 130-year-old German violin just like, oh, we have been through 2 world wars, it is fine. And Geoffrey Beauregard is a personality. If you've ever played music with me or spent any time with me, it's almost like he's an entity, It is much more like a guardian angel or a spirit guide team member or something like that, because someone once said, oh, he's your taskmaster. And I haven't planned a lot of things. Geoffrey just sort of makes things happen. So I might get a little woo-woo sometimes, and I might get a little esoteric, and I might quote some scripture, and I might use a Buddhist phrase or a technique for meditation or a breathing practice, but I just follow one unshakable why, and that is vibration, because our entire universe is built on vibration. And it doesn't matter what world religion you look at, when they go to their cosmology, in the beginning was the capital W word. In ancient India, they say that the lion roared into existence. C.S. Lewis says that too. And quantum physics now also says that, and says everything that you experience is built up of vibration. And so my unshakable why taught me how the cosmos is ordered, because it is all based on the same frequencies. And the need to make music has gotten me through a bunch of things that a lot of people would have been grounded forever by and would have just given up. And it helped me heal from my complex post-traumatic stress disorder, because it kept if I got triggered before a show, that I couldn't play my best and solo. And I spent my whole 20s in therapy figuring out how to compartmentalize my trauma out of my brain so I could be present, focused, and available to make music. Then, after a whole variety of health issues, from birth to my cancer diagnosis at 36, which I'll explain along the way, being able to conquer those to be healthy enough to perform has always been what made me do everything. So this is my unshakable why, and I want to help you, hopefully along the way, find your unshakable why if you haven't yet, and figure out how to use food and music and joy to get you through anything. So follow me here, subscribe to my channel. Please comment below if you have an unshakable why and you already know what it is, or ask some questions about how you can figure out what your unshakable why is, or if you want to hear more stories from all of my health trials, or if you want recipes for my anti-inflammatory cooking, or how I have developed a bunch of systems so it doesn't take very much time every day, because cooking all your food from scratch can be a full-time job, but it doesn't have to be. And I've figured out a way to do both with a very limited amount of physical energy, because I save it all for the fiddle. So hopefully I'll see you out there on the stage. And if you only know me here from YouTube, someday I'd like for you to come to one of my shows and I'll meet you there. So I'm Alyssa Joy Claffey. This is Geoffrey Beauregard. I always cry. I just get so overwhelmed because it really has been quite a long journey, but I'm here and I'm finally ready to share my story. So, see you on the next video.